Hi friends, Josh from the Narrate team here. This past weekend, Narrate started a new series titled The Burden of Power. Adam talked about the relationship between power and vulnerability.
Hey, good morning. It's not really morning. It's like 4 o'clock, isn't it? And you guys still didn't get up early. That is awesome. So we make this, sorry, it sounds like now I'm making fun of you, but I have to say the 8:30 and the 10 were packed. So good job sticking with your patterns. We're thankful for that. You help us serve people effectively at the 10, where people are now sitting on each other's shoulders. So we've made this joke for years that we don't butcher chickens on Sundays. It's kind of this semi-inside, semi-not inside, I guess, joke. But this morning I got here and I came through that side door. I was the first one here to flip on the lights. And there was a bunny, like a rabbit, on the stage. And of course, what does the rabbit do when he sees me? But he's back there somewhere eating wires and short-circuiting the whole deal. So just so you know, in case he shows up, we might have to butcher a rabbit live and in person. Have I mentioned I don't want to own a building? Has that come up before? Poor Cal and the crew. Now I got to figure out, you just have to trap the rabbit, right? And if you trap the rabbit, you have to eat the rabbit. Isn't that how that works? So I don't know if you've heard the name Tim Elmore, but if you're a parent of teens and find yourself stymied at times, Tim Elmore would be a good name. He's what they call church famous. He's done a lot of research as it relates to generational tendencies and how each generation is distinct from the other. And so Gen Z, which I think is what they're calling the latest generation now, I've heard IY, but how Z is different than Y is different than X, and those three are different than all the others. I recently heard him, I heard him a couple years ago tell a story and was reminded of it here recently. It involves a girl who was a freshman at Syracuse University. She walked into the class and along with everybody else learned that at the start of this class, the professor was handing back a paper that presumably they'd handed in a week or two prior. And this girl, when she got her paper, she looked at it, and there was something on her paper that had never been on one of her papers before, and it was the third letter of the alphabet, followed by a little minus sign. She'd never in her whole life received a C- on anything, and the realization of that caused her to almost instantly get emotive. She started tearing up and making noises, and she went back to her desk, and there's this freak show unfolding, and the students that are close are trying to pretend like they don't know what's going on and kind of paying attention and kind of not, and then she got back to her desk, and she did the only thing that a Gen Z would know to do in this situation. She reached into her phone or into her backpack and grabbed her phone, and she texted her mom and told her mom that she'd got a C- on a paper, and she was pretty upset about that, and they exchanged, as she was telling her mom about that, her mom actually, maybe not knowing the circumstance, maybe not caring the circumstance, her mom just replied with a phone call. So she called her, and the girl answered. And so now, what started as semi-contained freak show was full-on freak show, because this girl is now in the middle of this class crying semi-hysterically, telling her mom that evil professor gave her a C-. And so now because Ray, you've been in the car when someone starts talking. Am I the only one that's kind of a pet peeve? Like when you're in a car and someone's talking on the phone, it's like, well, I guess I'll look out the window because my brain can't even think right now. So the whole class is now kind of zeroing in on this situation. And it gets better. Because the girl stood up and she started walking to the front of the class, and as she did so, she took the phone away from her ear and she reached out to the professor and said, my mom would like to speak to you. Right? Is that insane? Yes. And I think it frames for us this conversation that I want to have through Thanksgiving. It's a conversation on power. And it seems like that story captures the reality that every character in the story, even the sum total of all the other students, if they're one or several characters, that every character has power, and yet, like you and I, are not always sure how to use it. They all have power, and sometimes they think they're the only ones, and sometimes they think they're the only ones that should, and sometimes even though they do have power, they feel like they don't have any power, and sometimes they have lots of power, and they'd like everyone to know that, like the case of the mom in this story. But I want to explore this in this next 4 weeks, you guys, and I guess, to be honest with you, for me it was sparked by the upcoming election. And the staff all told me, people are sick of talking about the election, so I'm not going to talk about the election. But it just strikes me that if we're not careful, what happens in dynamics like this is we start looking at a bunch of people who want power, and we presuppose they're the only ones. And if we're not careful, we assume not only are they the only ones that they want power, but we assume that that's a bad thing. And I guess what I want to suggest this morning is that the God of the text has some completely different thoughts on that. The trouble is, power it's messy. In fact, we debated using words like authority or influence, but in the end stuck with power, because I think in all of its jadedness and pointedness and weightedness, I think that's appropriate, because power, it is kind of weird. It is kind of uncomfortable. We don't necessarily like to talk about it. No husband walks around the house saying, I have power, and at least we hope he doesn't. and no mom, and no wife, no boss. I mean, certainly that may happen, but it's not best when it does. You know, I was walking home from work on Tuesday, and I had this emotional realization, and I'm not asking for your sympathy, but I did have this realization of, if I ever voluntarily stop doing this, like if I ever stop this whole, ma'am, if we can find you a seat, Kate can help you with that. If I ever voluntarily stop doing this, it'll be because there's this disconnect between what I say and what I do, and the impossibility of that. And sometimes it's a little much to bear, isn't it? And that's not just a me thing. That's a boss thing. That's a parent thing. That's a spouse thing. You see, part of my routine is that the creative team really needs me to stay 3 to 6 months ahead. That I'm studying stuff and paying attention to stuff and looking for threads and studying the text and reading books and listening to podcasts and trying to understand, like, okay, what's the potential series idea that's relevant to our lives? What happens then is I get to spend 4, 6, 8 weeks studying something. And then I have to, and I kind of put it in a can and have it all ready for a series, and then I put it aside. I've got journal notes and entry notes and all this different personal stuff and not personal stuff and thoughts and questions and observations, and then I put it aside. And then on a day like this last Tuesday, where we're getting ready to start a series, I pick it all up again. And it's a bit of an audit. Because to be honest with you, I walk away from it hoping that I've changed, hoping that I've transformed, hoping that I'm going to live a little bit differently. And then when you come back at it, it'd be like you looking at the Hello, My Name is Anxiety series again starting tomorrow. There's this kind of internal audit of, like, wait a minute, did anything change? And to be honest with you, when I came back on Tuesday, I was kind of grossed out by myself to see how much my tendencies are my tendencies and how hard they are to break. And so I say all that to say I don't want this to be a shaming conversation, and I'm definitely not the guru. So if you're someone that doesn't struggle with the power that you have, then there's some great things you can do on Sunday morning other than come to Narrate, because this is what we're going to wrestle with. And just begin to kind of go, like, it starts here, I think. Where do you have power? And you probably have never said that out loud, and it would be a little weird if you did, but where does your power lie? I mean, as a spouse, again, that would be a little weird if you started talking about your power. But could we just be honest and say that there's not a person perhaps on the planet that has more impact on another person, on your spouse's emotional, psychological health and well-being than you do? Maybe nobody impacts who she or who he sees in the mirror every day than the words that come out of your mouth, than the looks that come from your eyes, than the thoughts that you share. Maybe one step even more scary is as a parent. I mean, listen, if you are one, I understand some of you wish you were, and I'm not trying to rub that in, but if you are one, it's unbelievable. And the trick is if you're not one, and especially if you're 12 or 14 or 16, and you're just like, I can't wait till I get out of this house because I don't have any power, and someday I will. It's not true. You have incredible amounts of power. If it's not your mom or your dad's husband or wife that impacts them the most, it's you. And that's not your thing to bear, but it's the truth. And that's just relational. That's at home. We could talk about what it means to be a boss and what it means to be a supervisor and what it means to be a manager and what it means to not be, both of which involve power. Listen, if you're not the boss, I understand every boss you've ever had is the worst boss ever. Here's the thing. They don't get to have bad days. Like you do, but they don't. And conversely, if you are the boss, you have meetings all the time with people. They don't get to choose when the meeting is over. You do. There's power. We could talk about finances. Some of you have more zeros after your last name than you ever imagined. Your financial picture is surging up and to the right. You have more financial power than you ever imagined having. Your reputation. You're powerful. You used to be the newbie. You used to be the intern. You used to be the rookie, and you got to play the dumb card. It's not you anymore. Like the culture of your office is set by you. The how helpful are we to one another? You're the one now with the authority, the responsibility, because you're the one that has the experience. Listen, this power thing is something that if we're not careful, we run from, but it strikes me the text begs us not to do that. Andy Crouch, another thinker that we've talked about in the past and we'll talk about again, he points out that human beings are the most powerful creatures on the planet. And that's not to say they're the only powerful ones. Animals are also powerful. Other things, living things, are also powerful. But the observation he made that was new to me was he said, but they all have their powerful impact within a niche. You know, a beaver that builds a dam has an impact, and even a long-standing impact, but it's within a very tight niche, not humans. Our impact transcends all boundaries, whether they're geographical and environmental, from the Himalayas to Antarctica to the ocean floor to a desert, whether they're relational, whether they're financial. People could make a decision today that would literally end life on the planet today. And the tricky thing is that sounds really gross and scary, and this text, this God says that's the way he wanted it. In Genesis 1:28, the text says this: God blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves along the ground. See, this God's not determinist. If you've reached the point emotionally where you think, I shouldn't have power and neither should anybody else, that's altogether different than the character of this God. This God keeps giving power. And you have to wonder a little bit, don't you, whether the original readers understood the full scope of what was being said here, whether they could imagine the degrees to which this power would be abused and others by it. See, there's this reality that the text causes us, I think, to be a little bit stymied, a little bit intimidated. There's a sense of like, I don't know if I want it. Well, one example for me are the biblical heroes. Go ahead to that next slide. I was kind of proud of this one. The biblical heroes, they're heroes, but they're also reluctant heroes. They're also failed heroes. I mean, if we could just be honest, because I think what it causes us to do is cause us to go like, why do we find ourselves so scared of this thing called power? Well, we should be scared of it, because even the biblical heroes didn't do all that great. Adam and Eve were given incredible power to serve creation and one another, and what did they do with that power? They use it for themselves to become like God. Or even take Joseph. He's this interesting character because especially as evangelicals, we celebrate Joseph, the son of Jacob, the man with the Technicolor dream coat, right? The guy who did incredible things in Egypt. But he was a fascinating character because he was also, long before he was the hero in Egypt who saved the nation, he was kind of a power monger. I mean, just consider Genesis 37. I don't know whether you've contemplated this before, but look at Genesis 37. It says this: Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. Now, by the way, the text neither confirms nor denies that this dream came from God, so it's silent on that. He said to them, listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright while your sheaves gathered around me and bowed down to it. And that makes for a really uncomfortable staff meeting, doesn't it? Like, hey, you guys, we're going to do this rally cry staff meeting, and your boss is like, I had this dream. I mean, it completely lacks tact. And listen to the way the text continues. His brother said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of the dream of what he had said. But he keeps going, like he's completely tactless. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. Listen, he said, I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. Here's just some relational advice. If you have this dream, keep it to yourself, right? This is probably compiled in the Babylonian world, where, by the way, much like horoscope culture today, the belief was that the sun and the moon and the stars controlled the destinies of nations and people. What is Joseph claiming about himself here? And again, even if he did have this experience from God, probably nothing but a freak show if you share it, right? And his dad gets involved. When he told this, his father, as well as his brothers, rebuked him like, Joseph, you can't go around like that. Like, that is creepy. You can't do that. And it doesn't stop with Joseph. Moses, extraordinary power. He was raised in the courts of Egypt. He was deeply needed by his people. And what did he do with his power? It started with murder. And then even then, we'll talk a little bit more about this, he withdrew. He stuck his thumb in his mouth and said, fine, if you don't want me, I'll leave. Translation, he took all of his training, all of his passion, all of his experience, and went, fine. If you're going to put up resistance, if you're not going to worship me, then I'll just go use my power for myself. He completely withdrew. The kings of Egypt, I feel like I'm too redundant on this one, but as a dad, as a leader, as a husband, as a friend, as a Christ follower, I don't know about you, but the kings of Egypt terrify me. Saul didn't want it. Saul never wanted to be king. He was a reluctant king. He started a humble king. He died a power monger. David, same story. He didn't ever want to be boss. He just wanted to support his family. He wasn't looking to be the manager, the supervisor. He didn't have any idea what he was getting himself into when he did. And if you're looking for a testament that power corrupts, then really you don't have to look any further than David. Solomon, maybe a little less reluctant, but the same storyline. He started with this humble desire to follow God, and he died with a bunch of combines. You know what I mean? There's this thing that happens. So here's my point. If you catch yourself as a boss, as a dad, as a spouse, as a person with skills, if you catch yourself balancing the checkbook as you drive by a homeless person, if you catch yourself watching your nice TV while there's a commercial about people starving in Africa, and you have this sense of like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. That's very central to the way this God suggests that we view life. This God offers us a warning about all the ways power can go on. There's one more example, if I can share it with you, lest I put you to sleep too quickly. Can you handle one more? So I want to talk about Babylonian exile. And this one's a little more controversial, so just any emails, it's hannah@narratechurch.org. So starts with an H and ends with an H. She's got deep theological training. She can answer all of your questions. So many scholars, and when I say many, it's safely said the majority of scholars think that Genesis, as well as Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, that it was at the very least compiled in the 6th century BCE in Babylon. Now, that might not mean anything that date, but that would be significant because if that's true, that means Moses didn't compile the stories. Now, that doesn't mean that there wasn't an oral tradition that he sparked that led to that, but most literary criticism scholars of the Bible, both those who follow Jesus and those who don't, go, no. They were compiled by priests in Babylon. Now, why is that significant? Well, it's significant because what's the situation in the 6th century BCE if you're a Jewish person in Babylon? The situation is, for the last 150 years, the only thing you've known is international conflict. Twice now, your country, your walls, your temple have been completely obliterated and destroyed. This God had been saying to you, and it's all over the Old Testament, if you don't stop abusing your power, I'm going to rip it out of your hands. And he did. He took it from them. He took it from them finally in the form of the Babylonian Empire, who showed up, sunk their navy, destroyed their air force, killed off their army, destroyed the walls, toppled the temple, carried the people that had wealth and means and education back to Babylon, killed the rest of them, excommunicated anybody from living in Jerusalem for the foreseeable future, brought them back to Babylon, and now these people were there. The men were forced to marry Babylonian women. The women forced to marry Babylonian men. The whole idea was they were going to deal fully and finally with this Jewish problem in Babylon. And so now you're a person, and you're in Babylon. Everything you know about God has gone unfulfilled. Well, except for the whole part of he's going to take away your power. But all the promises of protection and blessing and blessed so that you'll be a blessing, they're all gone. Your entire way of worship and relating to God completely destroyed. The temple, gone. See, the emotional response of these people, we find it in Psalm 137. Listen to this. Go to that next slide. They say, by the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. See, they didn't even know which way was up anymore. Everything they thought they could trust, everything they had confidence in was taken from them. Why is that significant? They had abused power, and now they're being abused by power. And what the scholars would say is that the priests of Israel started to assemble the oral tradition in order to make sense for the people of a future. And how do they start that story? Is it a story about how only God should have power, and when people use it, it just gets corrupted? Is it a story about a determinist God who has a bunch of puppets who walk around the planet fulfilling his will? No, the story still starts in Genesis 1 with a God who says, you're made to reign, to rule. So somehow emotionally, despite the fact that they've abused power, despite the fact that they've been abused by it, they hang on to the identity of a God who says, no. For better and for worse, people are going to be parents, and people are going to have jobs, and people are going to have skills, and people are going to make decisions And just because they're going to abuse those more often than not, we're not going to remove them. Now, just imagine with me then what the story of Abraham would mean to you if you were living in Babylon, all you knew was failure, and these priests are trying to give you hope. And all of a sudden, they remind you that a guy named Abraham in Genesis 12 was told that his line would be a blessing to other nations, that they'd be empowered to use that. Imagine Genesis 18, where Abraham's sitting outside of his tent, and these three men show up, and they're to pay a visit with him, and they have this whole exchange about what's going to happen in the future and all these different things. They have this meal. Remember, this is the exchange where the angels say, hey, I'm going to come back in a year, and Sarah will have a child. And remember, Sarah laughs. She's like, you don't know how old my husband is, and the lady in the blue dress has not paid a visit. See, nobody knows that. Really, I was so proud of that one. You could ask Hannah who the lady in the blue dress is, or somebody else. Someone had to ask me between services, who's the lady in the blue dress? Anyway, I don't know what I'm talking about. Genesis 18, check this out. In Genesis 18, these people, as they're getting ready to leave, these visitors, the text says this, then the Lord said, so it's like, you thought one of them was something more than human, and then it starts with, then the Lord said. So the cat's out of the bag. Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Well, you can't now that you've said that. Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him. Again, these are a people being reminded of this while they have nothing in Babylon. Look at verse 19. For I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to go to church, read their Bibles, fulfill God's will for them by having a quiet time every morning. It's actually not what God says he's using this line for. Those things may serve that purpose. They may be a means to that end, but listen to why he says he chose Abraham's line. To keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. What if this God knows that people who use their power well are the exception? What if this God knows that he's given dynamite to people, and actually using it in a way that blesses and serves others is going to take some kind of divine intervention? These people in Babylon suddenly have their whole identity changed, and suddenly they understand, wait a minute. God gives power so that we'll use it on behalf of others. Now, John Goldingay, one of my favorite Old Testament scholars, he points out that we're so familiar with these words justice and righteousness that we think we know what they mean, but they kind of don't mean that. Like to us, justice is treating people fairly, and righteousness is, wearing a tie on Sunday. But what they say is there's actually not an English word that's the equivalent to the Hebrew word. Here's John Goldingay's definition of justice. Go to that next slide. The authority to make decisions, which might explain why you're the boss, might explain why you're the spouse, it might explain why you lay in bed at night and think that maybe everybody would be better if you weren't the boss, or you weren't the spouse, or you weren't the dad, or you didn't have the money in the bank account. Listen to righteousness. His definition of righteousness, according to the original language, proper use of power, and especially in the context of mutual relationship. In other words, doing right by others with our power. In other words, using our power to serve someone other than ourselves. What if power works best when it's mingled with vulnerability? See, this would be the suggestion of a guy named Andy Crouch. Andy Crouch has written a book called Strong and Weak. We have a bunch of them back available there at the scattering table. You can buy one this morning if you want. I think they were $13.50. If you don't have exact change, that's okay. We'll figure all that out. But here's Andy Crouch's giant takeaway. Here we go. Next slide. What he points out is that when we just treat power as its own thing and don't intermingle it, if you will, with vulnerability, that's when we abuse it. Now, if you just kind of stick with me for a second, see what he points out is in bottom right, if you have someone who's highly vulnerable and has no power, that's a person who suffers. That might be a child who is abused in myriad ways. That might be a refugee. Then obviously the Bible is very pro taking care of these people. Bottom left, though, if you have someone with no vulnerability and no power, what he calls that is withdrawal. And here's the trick. Nobody actually is that unless they're extraordinarily powerful. Like, this is where wealthy, powerful, elite people hang out. This is where you and I hang out. This is what happens when a person says, I'm tired of taking risks and serving people. It hurts too much. I'm just going to go to my cabin and hide. This is what happens when leaders stop leading and spouses stop loving and parents just throw in the towel because it hurts too much. We're going to talk extensively about this the week of Thanksgiving because this is Moses. Just completely withdrawing, pretending not to have any power, when in fact, you just misunderstood why you have it. Top left then becomes exploiting. This is the monger, this is the abuser, this is the tyrant. This is the person who sees their power as an advantage to themselves and having no other purpose. But see, what he points out is when our conversations with power intermingle with our conversations with vulnerability, then we have the line of Abraham that God is talking about. Then we have a people who understand there's actually a proportional relationship to your power and the suffering that's probably going to come with it. Then we have leaders who understand leadership is hard and you're going to get criticized. While the Bible seems to paint a picture of a God who's pro your being empowered, it also seems to paint a picture of one who says with power comes vulnerability. And with that vulnerability is going to come suffering. What happens if we begin to understand that power and the possession of it isn't really the problem? It's the degree to which we're willing to get vulnerable with it. That's the problem. You know, perhaps the greatest person to ever flesh this vulnerability and power thing out was Jesus of Nazareth. A man who lived the most remarkable human life ever lived. We're going to talk extensively just about the astounding impact of his humanness. That thanks to him, we think about women differently and race differently, and not instantaneously, but no person, historians will say, has ever raised the value of individual people more. And yet you see within his life, not just power, but power and vulnerability. He was born an infant, the epitome of vulnerability. He died on a Roman cross. That would indicate he had no power over that situation. And yet he had extraordinary power. Your sitting here this morning is some reflection of the impact of that life. See, we want a life that's all power, all influence, no suffering. And theologians will point out over and over and over again, no, there's a very proportionate relationship in the text between the impact of a life and not just its power, but its suffering. Listen to the way the early church thought about Jesus, and what we're going to look at is something that theologians call the Philippian hymn. What that means is that Paul's writing this letter to the Philippians, but he didn't write this, he's quoting this. Some people go so far as to say this is the oldest piece of Christian creed that we have. And listen to what he says in Philippians 2, verse 6. He says, who being in very nature God, he being Jesus, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. And there's a whole other theological thought called Adam Christology, and what some people think is going on here is Paul, he's using this hymn to create some conversation about how Jesus used his power and how Adam used his. That Jesus laid his down and Adam took his up for his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. Verse 8, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. See, there's the irony. That what these guys understood, what the early church understood, was that Jesus' death on the cross was indicative of his being powerful and vulnerable. Verse 9, therefore God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. See, there's your theology of suffering. It strikes me that we want the life that is beautiful and impactful and insignificant, and then just before we suffer, we want to die. This text would say, no. Leadership is hard. Being the mom, being the dad is hard. Being the spouse, being the supervisor, that's tough. Having American citizenship, having all those zeros in your bank account, trying to reconcile what you should prioritize where. It's tough. So here's my challenge to us really in this series is what if we were to stop moralizing powerlessness? Because if we're not careful, we inadvertently communicate that really good, godly people, they're so humble that they neither have nor want power. And it just doesn't seem to be this God's story. What if instead what we understood was, no, with power comes vulnerability, comes the opportunity, the mandate to use it for other people's behalf, which means being misunderstood and ill-treated and taken advantage of. Here's my challenge to you this week, the degree to which you're looking for one, is what if you were to start your chair time this week, and that's just a phrase we use to say, like, what if you just get up 15 minutes earlier, 30 minutes earlier, and get your hot beverage and start it in a chair and just kind of reflecting, kind of thinking, kind of praying, maybe even talking to the God that you're not even sure you believe in. And what if you were just to spend it in Philippians 2? Just that old hymn. And what if you were to begin to try to reconcile your struggles with your power and the pain associated with it with Jesus in this hymn? In fact, what if you were to take it another step, and what if your drives to the office or whatever it is that you're doing during your day, what if you were to memorize Genesis 18:19 with the hopes that as you hit these intersections where you become acutely aware of your power, that you could choose vulnerability in those moments and do so wisely. And so I'm not suggesting this is some kind of formulaic thing and the solutions or the applications are easy. But what if this God made you for power, made you to possess influence, but wants to ensure that you use it for on other people's behalf? Listen, some of you are here and you're trying to figure Jesus out, maybe for the first time, maybe again. You're not sure if you believe anymore, or you used to. I can think of no better place to begin to wrestle with what you may or may not believe in than Philippians 2, because that is the claim of historic Orthodox Christianity, that this Jesus represented all power, all authority, and yet he laid it down by becoming a man and ultimately going to the cross on your behalf. And the fundamental belief is that this God, when you embrace that reality, when you embrace that narrative, when you believe that something happened there at the cross, that your sin does become forgiven in that moment, something happens internally. And this God empowers you to live it out. That the life Jesus calls us to is not one where we necessarily just try harder, though grace isn't opposed to that either, but one where God supernaturally empowers us. And part of that empowerment is the confession of failure when we don't live up to it. I'd like to pray, and we're going to sing. God, Lord, I'm thinking particularly of bosses and supervisors and leaders and parents. God, would you create the safe conversations and the healthy relationships where we can not run from vulnerability, but embrace it, and yet somehow do so in a way that is sustainable and has healthy boundaries. Jesus, thanks that you've preserved this ancient creed about the way you understood yourself and the way others understood you. And God, in this crazy season of elections and everything else, maybe we take long, hard looks in the mirror before we start pointing fingers. May we audit and take inventory of the power we possess and our desires for more. And may we envelop that in your grace and the vulnerability you call us to. Amen.
If you would like to engage further with Narrate Church, you can find contact information online, www.narratechurch.org. We would love to hear from you.